Could I just ask you to remain standing for a minute's silence for Councillor Peter Latham, who used to be the councillor in Benton Ward between 1998 and 2004. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Can I welcome everyone tonight, and can I especially welcome Diane Harold from the Authority's External Auditors, Mazars, to the meeting. And can I also mention that we've got the independent people from the Standards Committee here in the gallery as well. Right, where am I next? Let's increase up here. Right, now got some public questions, I believe. First one is from, oh sorry, I'm jumping the gun again. I'm always aware like a bullet at the start. Right, apologies for absence. I have Councillor Craven, Bulger, Early, Janet Hunter, Councillor Wheatman, Councillor Brooks, Osborne and Samuel. Is there anyone else? Yes, yeah. Councillor Walsh.
Councillor McIntyre.
Councillor McIntyre, right.
Councillor Rankin.
Councillor Rankin, thank you very much. Right, moves me on to the declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Yes, no? No declarations of interest. Yeah, and now we go back to public questions. Can I invite Mr. Austin to put his question to the council, or can we take it as read?
Take it as read, please, Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe you're answering the question, Mayor?
I am, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to be able to report that visitor numbers continue to increase in the area. An additional 16,000 people visited the coast over the weekend of the Spanish City opening. Also, an array of new businesses have opened in Whitley Bay due to the regeneration of the Spanish City and the master plan for the seafront. I am pleased to be able to report that 46 new businesses have already started up across the town in the last 6 months. Local businesses will also benefit from additional parking in the vicinity of the Spanish City and increased signage, which will direct visitors into the town centre. Overall, the regeneration of Spanish City, creating 140 new jobs, is helping to put Whitley Bay back on the map and increase confidence in the town, resulting in millions of pounds being invested by the private sector. This includes the Premier Inn, the Beefeater development next to the Spanish City, which saw 1.4 million investment and the creation of 59 jobs, while estimates suggest that a further 2.25 million has been invested by smaller and independent firms. I'm pleased to tell you that we have received some fantastic feedback from our residents and businesses, including the redevelopment which makes Whitley Bay a destination again, and every cafe restaurant and business will benefit from it. I understand from talking to my bar traders that there is an overwhelming view of the members of the Whitley Bay Chamber of Trade who have increased their membership from 20 to 275. The council have also established a town centre task group chaired by the Deputy Mayor to support town centre businesses and encourage collaboration. This group also delivers initiatives in the town centre to increase football and generate more business. And only today I received a phone call from a business person in Whitley Bay to say that thank you for what you've done. The football is increasing day by day, and everybody in the Chamber of Trade is delighted with what you've achieved and done for Whitley Bay. So thank you very much.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Okay, and I have to thank the elected mayor for that answer. Given that a sizable proportion of the funding for the regeneration came from the government via the Coastal Community Fund, can I ask if she has any plans to apply for further funding in order to extend the regeneration north of the Rendezvous Cafe?
I have to tell you that is on the agenda, and everything at the end of the day is about making that area much better. But there is a bid-in already for that. Okay?
Is Mr. Bartoli in attendance?
Thank you.
Would you like to read the question or take it as read?
I'd like to read it, please, Chair.
Right, fair enough. You just come down to the microphone.
Thank you. In light of the increased pressures and rising costs of parking to both residents and businesses in Tynemouth, can the Mayor tell us when a comprehensive review into parking in Tynemouth was last carried out?
I understand you're answering this on behalf of the Mayor, Councillor Johnson.
I am, Chair. Thanks. The Council has just reviewed its arrangements for parking in the entire borough and agreed a parking strategy at Cabinet on the 11th of September 2017. Right now, as a result of this strategy being approved, we are in the middle of a comprehensive review of permits, waiting area requests and residents' requests for restrictions. The last fundamental parking review that was specific to Tynemouth took place in 2010, with a further review that included an extension to include additional streets in 2014. This review included Percy Park Road, Seafield View and Oxford Street. We do keep parking arrangements under constant review as well. We are fully aware that parking is an emotive and challenging issue, particularly when you consider large parts of the borough were built well before the growth in car ownership. Tynemouth is one of these areas, and the consideration has always been and will remain how best to balance the needs of residents, business and visitors. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you. It's clear from Councillor Johnson's answer that the parking reviews in Tynemouth are well outdated. I think 2010 and 2014 were last quoted. Clearly that review is well out of date now, particularly in light of the increased popularity of Tynemouth with articles naming it the best place to live in the North East recently. Could I ask the elected Mayor if she would consider a halt in the punitive and discriminatory price rises to our parking permits until a more comprehensive and updated strategy for Tynemouth could be completed?
Mr. Bartoli, as said, the whole borough had a review in 2017, while it took in every other borough, not just Tynemouth. There was a specific one in Tynemouth 2014, but the entire borough's parking arrangements were reviewed in 2014. The balance in Tynemouth now seeks to support business, residents and visitors alike. There are over 89 spaces on Front Street, which cater visitors. There are 500 bays for residents parking permits, and there are 300 paint display parking bays, as well as free parking for 76 in Priors Haven. While undoubtedly it is a challenge parking, we continue to manage demand in a transparent, coherent and consistent way as clearly set out in the recently approved parking strategy. We believe the strategy at the moment is working best for Tynemouth, but we will always continue to listen to visitors, residents and businesses alike.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor.
Could I remind people to sign the attendance sheets, please? So if you don't sign, you're not here. And can we now move on to the presentation on children's services? Oh, I forgot the minutes. I'm not having a very good day today, am I? Sorry. It is. I asked the declarations of interest before. Is that still the same? Nobody got any interests before I forget. This is what happens when you start at 8 o'clock this morning. Yeah. And the next thing is, can we agree the minutes of the last council meeting on the 17th of May? Agreed, right. Can we now get into the proper format? And can I invite Wendy Burke down to do the presentation on children's services? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hall, yes. They reminded us about that. I think I'll go out and come back in, to be honest. Yes, can I invite Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Councillor Early, I would like to introduce Children's Services Update presentation by Wendy Burke, Director of Public Health, and Nick Flavel, Senior Manager Quality Assurance Children's Services. I am delighted to introduce a presentation which is going to provide an update on some aspects of children's services, notably the summary of the outcomes of inspections by Ofsted, the Care Quality Commission, known as the CQC, and a peer review. And alongside that, an overview of the highlights of our work with partner agencies on improving the mental health of our children and young people across the borough. One of our key priorities for improving outcome for young people in North Tyneside. Cabinet are incredibly proud of our children's services and the commitment they've shown to improving services for children, young people and their families across the borough. And tonight we will hear about some of that excellent work.
Can I now invite...
Good evening, Councillor and Chair, Mayor, thank you very much. My name is Nick Flavel. I'm Senior Manager for Quality Assurance with Children's Services. I intend to keep this overview of the external inspections brief on this hot evening. And by way of start, just to, if this is working, just to remind councillors just of the ambitious strategic context agreed by members which guides all the work for services for children and young people. You'll be well aware of the North Tyneside Plan and its ambitions for children and young people. You will hopefully also be aware of the 3 pledges by which the services coordinate their activities and undertake to work with children and young people, families, parents and carers. Firstly, to intervene early with evidence-based, family-focused services. Secondly, to work in partnership to keep children in school. And then thirdly, to keep them safe at home, healthy and connected to their communities. And it's really this, it's under these pledges that the services for children coordinate their activity and they're committed to improving outcomes for children and young people. If we can move on to the first external inspection, that was by colleagues from Ofsted as part of their national inspection programme, and in March 2017 spent no less than a 4-week period with us reviewing the authority's services for children in need of help and protection, services to children looked after, our services to care leavers and our services in relation to fostering and adoption. In June 2017, following the general and interregional general election took place, we received formal feedback. I'm delighted to say that the feedback was very positive, and Ofsted found the authority's services to be good with outstanding features, and that judgment placed the authority's services amongst the highest performing within the country. And the authority, I'm sure, is quite rightly very proud of the outcome that was achieved. Within the bullet points, rather than go through one by one, you'll see the very positive comments, and these quotes and these outcomes were taken directly from the findings. It is really pleasing to see that children and their voice, wishes, feelings and experience were really at the centre of social work practice. The social work itself was identified as of good quality. There's a range of early help support, that is a support before statutory social work safeguarding services become involved. They also looked at our responses in relation to homelessness, and also the way in which the authority acts as corporate parents, and found the authority to be highly ambitious and nurturing for the children and young people in its care. And also that the way in which the local authority uses the care system is that children only become looked after when it's in their best interest. And that very much relates to our pledge, where possible, that children and young people are kept connected to their communities and supported to live within their families. And then finally, that the leadership and management from elected members downwards was very committed to improving outcomes for children and young people. We haven't yet received a formal Ofsted inspection of our services to those children and young people who have special educational needs and disabilities. But what we did do was invite senior colleagues from other local authorities as peers to review our services in January of this year. Not only was that to ensure appropriate preparation for forthcoming inspection, but also very much as a sense check for the improvement work undertaken to date. And again, we would say we're very encouraged by the findings of the peer review, emphasising we're on the right track and that services are strong and improving. You may well be aware, councillors, of the work around education, health and care plans, which replaced statutory educational needs assessment, and that work was found to be exemplary. Services in general were identified to be of very high quality, particularly the help in schools and settings and other education settings to address the needs of children. They also found us to be innovative in our practice, that the leadership around this, what's known as the SEND agenda, or Special Educational Needs and Disability Agenda, was very strong, commended the work around early identification, and importantly that the local authority knows itself well. And that was reference to the fact that we have completed an in-depth look at ourselves to self-evaluate ourselves against best practice, and we are honest and transparent where we need to do more and where services are meeting our ambitions for this agenda. Thirdly, we've had a busy time. We received a Care Quality Commission inspection of children's public health, that is the health visiting and school nursing services, which councillors may recall transferred to the local authority on the 1st of April 2017. The inspection provided an opportunity to validate the massive amount of work that had been undertaken by the authority to transfer services across, and the staff group that came across. And the findings were hugely positive. They gave us assurance about the transfer, that it was safe, effective transfer of services, and commended the particularly high quality of staff, their passion for improving outcomes for children and young people, and the way in which services were being delivered. As part of the inspection, the service was found to protect children and young people from avoidable harm and abuse, that managers and practitioners work collaboratively with partner organisations, again commended the vision, strategy, leadership and governance, and noted it to be very person-centred in its approach to care. Commended the workforce, as I've said, noting it was a dynamic team and a passionate workforce as well, and that the services in place were organised to meet the needs of children and young people. And there was a particular focus on the safeguarding responsibility of health visiting and school nursing, and noted that they were sound, and also noted particularly the involvement of those services in the multi-agency safeguarding hub arrangements within the front door of the authority, and commended that as good practice. Said it would be a race through. Ofsted have also called, they seem to like us, and also called to inspect as part of their national inspection programme our adult learning services, and you will see once again it was a very positive inspection. Once again, the service has been through considerable change, and so it was an opportunity to externally get validation of the work that had been undertaken by colleagues, and to sense check the work that's been undertaken to ensure we're improving outcomes for children and young people. Found the services to be very effective, with a clear strategy, ambitious vision. Again, there is an element to check that services safeguard and promote outcomes for children and young people, and that services were found to be effective, and also very good partnership working, which I'm sure councillors will be aware of in relation to the adult learning agenda as well. Finally, and most recently, in May of this year, Ofsted decided it was time to come back, which was something of a surprise, and they undertook a two-day focused visit, which is really a brief inspection of a particular area. And the area they selected was our arrangements when concerns are brought to the attention of the local authority of a safeguarding nature in relation to children and young people. I'm delighted to say that focused on the multi-agency safeguarding hub, which was a significant change from the first external inspection that I referred to, and it gave us the opportunity with a new service area to have external challenge and scrutiny, and they found we do it well. They found that children are responded to appropriately and safe decisions are made, that it is a well-managed service, and sound social work practice, that the social workers within the multi-agency safeguarding hub and the assessment team practice well to a high standard. Again, a year later from our previous inspection, the child is at the centre of the work that is undertaken. Children are listened to, they are seen, they are spoken to, their world, concerns and worries are understood, and that informs our response. They commended partnership working. We are very fortunate as an authority with our strong and mature partnership relationships with police colleagues, with health colleagues, with education colleagues, as well as a range of internal partnerships with housing, domestic abuse colleagues, a number of agencies co-located together, providing a joint response. They found the team to be motivated and conscientious, and they also commended the signs of safety work that is undertaken. That is a model of practice that has been adopted by Children's Services. And I think it would be fair to say, with a level of professional scepticism as inspectors about the implementation of signs of safety as a model, and went away persuaded that it is making a significant positive contribution to the services that we deliver to children and young people. By way of reassurance, they looked at particular vulnerable groups within the borough and the response of the multi-agency safeguarding hub to those. They looked at child sexual exploitation, homelessness of 16 to 17-year-olds, and those children and young people impacted by domestic abuse, and again found that our response is assured, strong and child-focused. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Wendy Burke.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm going to tell you a bit about promoting, protecting and improving children and young people's mental health in the borough. I do. Thank you. So most of our children and young people in North Tyneside have really good mental health. This means they're positive about themselves, they can cope with day-to-day life and the challenges it brings, and they're able to form and keep relationships. While our figures of diagnosed mental health problems are estimated to be less than the national average, the data is quite old, and we await results of a new survey which will be published later this year, and I suspect they will show that the level of undiagnosed mental health problems and distress in young people is higher than officially recorded in the past. There's a lot of debate nationally about what is causing the increase in mental health problems in young people, and in particular the impact of social media, and we do know also that the stigma around mental health problems is decreasing, which is really welcome news because our young people are much more likely to be open about the problems that they're facing. So mental health is a really essential part of our children and young people's overall health. It's got a really complex interactive relationship with their physical health and their ability to succeed at school, at work and in society. And you will all be aware that mental health affects how we think, feel and act on the inside and out. In fact, there is no health without mental health. So we've got some facts and figures. We've got a national prevalence of about 10% of diagnosed mental health problems, but we know that only 25% of children and young people who experience mental health receive appropriate interventions at a sufficiently early age. 50% of mental health problems that occur in adulthood were established before the age of 14, 75% by the age of 24. We know that if a mother has depression, there's a 5-fold increase in the risk of the child having mental health problems, and we also know that mental health problems in 11 to 15-year-olds are slightly more common in boys. Of course, the inequality underlines many of the risk factors for mental health problems in childhood and adolescence, and as a result, some of our groups of young people are disproportionately affected. So looked after children, young people in prison, unaccompanied asylum seekers, children with a learning disability, and those with special educational needs are all much more vulnerable. So children's and young people's mental health has become a national priority area. There are a number of key policy areas, and reviews have been commissioned over recent years. The policy documents all set out the challenges that we face in addressing some of these problems, and they all clearly point to prevention and early intervention as the best mechanism. Yesterday, we saw the government's response to the consultation on the Children's Mental Health Green Paper and the call for bids for trailblazer sites to test out some of the new ideas around the development of mental health support teams in schools and the reduction in waiting time for CAMHS to 4 weeks. So what are we doing at North Tyneside about it all? Well, based on the Thrive model, we've moved away from tiers of services and a pure focus on clinical mental health services to a much more holistic view. There's a need for a system response because mental health is everybody's business, from families to individuals, to communities, to schools, to third sector organisations. And the quadrants of the circle that you see on the slide represent how to support children and young people cope, get help, get more help, and get risk support. And our strategy's got 4 key areas, but one of the key strands running through all of this is actually listening to young people. Listening to the voices of children and young people is the key to improving their mental health and well-being, and it's our greatest challenge to be open to what young people have to say, shifting from that paternalistic perspective of adults know best. So in North Tyneside, our young citizen researchers that have been part of the Mental Health 2000 project interviewed in excess of 500 young people across the borough, and they told us at a showcase event in May, very explicitly I have to say, the things that are really important to them to improve mental health, and they're listed on the slide. And our task is to now turn the recommendations of this fabulous report into action. Under the first strand of our strategy, this is some of the work that we've been focused on, helping schools to implement a whole school approach to supporting students' mental health, providing training for our teachers and school staff to support pupils with issues such as depression, anxiety, self-harm, working with the Anna Freud Centre to improve communication and joint working arrangements between schools and mental health professionals, and of course, as one of the 3 national sites participating in the Mental Health 2000 project. The second strand of work has seen the implementation of Couth.com, an online digital platform offering support and counselling help to those aged between 10 and 18. It's been rolled out in all our high schools and colleges across the borough and with third sector partners. Also, the development of a clear referral pathway enabling head teachers and SENCOs to refer appropriate young people directly into the specialist child and adolescent mental health services so that they receive timely support. The third strand of the work is focused on our high-risk groups. So our looked after children are approximately 4 times more likely to have a mental health disorder than their counterparts living in their birth families. For our more vulnerable young people, building resilience, improving early recognition, timely access to services and improved response is really important. We also conducted an audit of suicides under 18. Unlike the data for adult, this data is not reported nationally, and this piece of work enabled us to have a broader understanding of some of the common themes in some of these very, very sad cases. Particularly those around adverse childhood experiences of such things like domestic abuse, bereavement, parental substance misuse, and also self-harm. The final strand is around the work we're doing around the workforce, and we are committed in North Tyneside to ensuring that all staff working with children and young people have confidence and competence to recognise and identify emerging mental health needs. Going right back to the very early days of infancy is really important. 10 to 20% of women suffer mental health problems during pregnancy and the first years of having a baby, and we're rolling out evidence-based training to frontline staff to support the development of a professional knowledge and skills in the period to promote positive attachment as a key protective factor. There are, of course, some significant challenges in all of this work, ensuring that services are effective, easily accessible, and that they get to the right children who are suffering mental health problems. We know that there is rising demand, increasingly complex needs, waiting times for specialist services, the provision of a skilled workforce is problematic, lack of accurate data and constraints on funding, not to mention a very confusing landscape of commissioning and the provision of mental health services. But there are nonetheless some really good opportunities to respond to some of these challenges, not least those offered by the recent announcements this week. So to conclude, I just want to finish off with a very powerful quote from a young woman which epitomises why addressing mental health needs in childhood and adolescence is such an important area, and why it is so important that we get it right for our children and young people in North Tyneside. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I now invite questions from members? Anybody got any questions? No? Comments? Anyone got any comments? Councillor Pickard?
Well, I'd just like to say we've always thought we've had very good services in North Tyneside, but now we can confirm that following external scrutiny we can actually demonstrate that we really do have that excellent level of services. And as all members in the council express their concern about how we looked after children, it's good to see that that concern and the professionalism of the officers is enabling a high level of delivery to be made in North Tyneside. It's also good to see that it's been recognised nationally and that the government have given us the support through additional funding of £1 million and 1.6 million to actually work with South Tyneside to actually take out good practice to the rest of the councils so they can learn from the experience that we've been through. And I think it's a testimony to the professional of the officers, and they should all be thanked for delivering such a good service on behalf of ourselves to the children in North Tyneside.
Mayor Redfern?
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers for their hard work, but make it very, very clear that we're not complacent, right? That we continue to give the best support to our young people across the borough. Thank you very much indeed.
Is there anyone else? Councillor, I forgot your name. Wallace. I'm not having a good day, am I?
I'd simply like to echo the Mayor and to thank the staff very much for the work that they're doing in this really important field. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Oh, sorry. We've got another one sticking in the corner. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would just like to echo those congratulations to all the staff and to everyone involved. It's an excellent recognition, I suppose, of all the hard work, but I think it's pretty miraculous as well in the context in which we're working with year-on-year cuts and services being squeezed to the bone. I think it's really an impressive result, and congratulations, everyone.
Anyone else before Councillor Gary Bell?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like again to thank all the staff because I know they worked really hard in getting these results. Thanks to Nick and Wendy for doing the presentation because I meet these guys quite a bit and I know how committed they are to the service. And also, the MASH is it's open to all councillors. It's on the second floor. I'm sure if you contact me or Margaret or Peter, we can arrange a visit. And it's a really worthwhile endeavour we're on because we're going to lead where others are falling down, and we are going to get the MASH basically enables everyone to work together. So in the old days we had to go scrapping around for stuff. Now we've got a team there who can safeguarding is instant if there's a need to intervene early. So it's really for our residents, it's a massive step forward. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Because I've had 3 stabs at winding this up. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can we now move on to the motion? Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to bring this motion to the Council. Britain's public transport system is becoming a national embarrassment. Prices continue to spiral out of control, while the private operators run the services often run into difficulties, resulting in the franchises collapsing well before the renewal dates. The financial sustainability of the region depends upon a good transport network, especially in view of the impact of Brexit and as we move towards devolution. A good rail network will allow for the efficient movement of people and goods around the region and will be a key factor in attracting businesses into our region. The East Coast Railway was brought into public ownership in 2009 after the collapse of the 2 previous operators, GNER and National Express. During its time in public ownership, it operated at substantial profit. In 2014, the government, ignoring the advice of many organisations, reprivatised the line. The new operator, operating under the name Virgin Trains, ran into difficulties and, as predicted by many, including this council, the franchise collapsed. This is the 3rd private operator to run the vital East Coast line into the ground. What is also clear is that since privatisation in 1996, the East Coast line has only been successfully run under public ownership. Despite this, the government, after taking over from yet again another failed franchise, intends to return the franchise into private operator in 2020. This council believes that the East Coast Main Line should not be put back into the hands of another private operator, but that it should remain in public ownership. We therefore ask the Mayor to write to the Secretary of State for Transport, Chris Grayling, outlining our support for retaining public ownership over the East Coast Main Line. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, I believe you're seconding this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to second this motion. It's closing in on 5 years now to propose the motion asking the Mayor to write to the government, asking them not to privatise East Coast, because of the history of private-run railways on this line continually failing. 5 years on, another private operator came and gone and left the taxpayer out of pocket. While this time around, LNER might not be truly in public hands, since East Coast returned to public hands, the government decided it would shut down directly operated railways and privatise the operator of last resort. Very short-sighted, considering the history of this route, and will now add to the spiralling costs of paying the private sector a daily rate for an LNER. The Stagecoach Virgin partnership should never have been awarded the contract in the first place, which even Chris Grayling now admits is the case. East Coast, while the public hand returned more money to the Treasury than the privately operated West Coast Main Line and met all of the government's income targets, while private operators of the line always failed to meet government income targets. East Coast Main Line, while privately run, has continually cost the taxpayer, offered much poorer services, stopped rewarding customers, increased ticket prices, and made catering and accessibility a lottery. However, when publicly run, the East Coast franchise delivered £1 billion to the UK Treasury, kept fares down, had record passenger satisfaction, and engaged with the workforce. It's therefore clear it's imperative that the East Coast Main Line should be kept in public hands. The government has a chance to ensure this continues, now with the falling short of the Virgin contract, and the only way they can do this is by keeping it in public hands. I urge the government to do so and council to support this motion.
Can I now invite members to speak to the motion? Anyone? Councillor Hodgson?
Thank you, Chairman. I've referred to the collapse of nationalised railways in debate before, and I would not wish to go there again. However, the proposers of the motion are right to draw attention to the recent chaos in the semi-privatised railway system. It must be sorted out, and all those responsible know that. A letter from the Mayor of North Tyneside Council to the Secretary of State will bring no useful new information to bear on the problem, and in fact it will be ignored. However, what could be relevant would be for the North Eastern Combined Authority to contribute its views to the Minister, together with a detailed implementation plan. I think that could be helpful all round. I will not be supporting the motion at present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, Chairman. Labour have rehearsed the arguments against nationalisation before, and our position remains the same, that nationalisation generally results in poorer service and lower standards and higher costs for the taxpayers and for customers. What is needed is actually more competition rather than less. Where the companies on the East Coast have suffered problems, it is almost always because of infrastructure failures, and that is the responsibility of Network Rail, which is actually the nationalised part of the rail service. We certainly don't want that extended to the rest of the network. I won't be supporting the motion.
Councillor Frank Lott?
Thank you, Chair. The whole sorry saga of privatisation and franchising began in 1986 when the government launched the Tell Sid campaign that I'm sure many of us will remember, to encourage people to buy shares in British Gas. We all watched as, one by one, our public utilities, described by Harold Macmillan as the Foundry Silver, were sold off. Among the first to go were British Telecom, then British Airways and British Steel. The water firms and energy companies followed. And finally, in the last days of John Major's government, British Rail fell foul of this particular policy. The system of privatisation created by the Tories is so dysfunctional, it allows taxpayers' cash to be filtered through private firms into the hands of a few shareholders. For example, Go Ahead, which runs Southern, South Eastern, London, Midland and GTR, received £132 million in government subsidies last year, but it paid shareholders dividends of 48 million. Now this particular situation that we've got has led to a position whereby the government is in a dispute with itself over compensation. When Virgin Trains East Coast received its compensation from government-owned Network Rail, it claimed a further £72 million for sustained poor performance. Network Rail admitted liability, but disputed the amount. So the claim went to an independent adjudication, but this has not yet been settled, and it wasn't settled before Virgin Trains East Coast's premature exit from their contract. So now that transfers onto LNER. So we now have the unedifying spectacle of a government trying to determine how much cash should be moved from one government body to another, and all because of a failing railway. It's interesting to note, incidentally, that Stagecoach, which you'll recall owned 90% of Virgin Trains East Coast, is now one of the bidders for the latest South Eastern franchise. So, despite 3 failed franchises for rail services to the North East and Scotland, despite millions of pounds being wasted in the franchising process, the last one alone cost the ratepayer 15 million, and despite his own experience of his disastrous attempt to privatise the probation service, Christopher Grayling, who's been asked to change his name, his Christian name to Failing, for the sake of accuracy, seems determined to ignore evidence and logic, and instead he intends to offer up common sense and further taxpayers' money as a sacrifice to the altar of privatisation. Surely it's time for this practice of legitimising and indeed facilitating the transfer of taxpayers' money into the pockets of shareholders, foreign investment companies and fat cat executives to be brought to a shuddering halt. If you agree, please support this motion. But don't tell Sid.
Did I see your hand up, Councillor Pickard?
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Thank you, Chair. I support this motion because I think the case for nationalisation is overwhelming, both in terms of our economy and in terms of social policy. The rail network cannot run without public subsidy. The private operators would not be able to run the service without the massive taxpayers' investment in Network Rail. And that's why to try to refer back to the old days of nationalisation is inappropriate, because since then there's been massive investment by the government in National Rail, which is run by the government. The franchise train company's income is mostly from ticket sales, and this can be very profitable business for the directors and shareholders, with the pay for the top directors being an average of £300,000 and dividends of over £200 million a year paid out to shareholders. Compare this to the experience of the East Coast Rail, was brought under government control in 2009 after the collapse of the National Express franchise, and under public ownership in terms of service, satisfaction rates increased to over 90%. In terms of value for money, in its final year provided £225 million back to the Treasury and made a pre-tax profit of over £8 million. Yet political dogma took over, and the Conservative government in 2014 re-privatised the line and gave the franchise to Virgin. And once again it failed, that the franchise collapsed, having to be bailed out a year later. I just saw a press report the other day which actually said that the Transport Secretary Chris Grayling unveiled while he was actually talking to Parliament. He said it was high-risk franchise, and he would have been very wary about going ahead if he'd been in charge of the railways at the time. So even he thought the Virgin franchise was wrong at the time. So the choice is stark. I do not believe that the state should massively invest in National Rail to put the money into the pockets of franchise directors and shareholders, but it should be for the benefit of the whole country. But this is not just about rail finance. The East Coast Line is vital for the economic prosperity of the North East. Private companies make short-term investments based on profit. However, we need long-term capital investment to boost our economy and for social reasons. The North East already misses out on rail investment, with the recent House of Commons inquiry reporting that investment for roads, rail and other forms of public transport was on average for England £425 per head, while in London it was £944 per head, yet in the North East the lowest in the whole country was £291 per person per year. This poor level of investment would leave the North East at a major economical disadvantage in normal times, but with the imminent Brexit negotiations it will leave the North East in a perilous situation. The government predictions under the various scenarios have been published by the House of Commons. They show that compared to the status quo, if we go down the European Economic Area solution, the GVA of the North East would reduce by -3%. If we went down to free trade arrangements, it would actually reduce by 11%. However, if we crashed out on the World Trade Organization route, the government predict a reduction of over 16% in GVA. It's interesting from the chart, and I have a copy here on the House of Commons, that the North East stands out massively losing compared to the rest of the country. That is a disgrace, and that needs to be resolving. In every scenario, the North East looks seriously in trouble, no matter what the scenarios that they come up to. We can't allow the North East to suffer in this way. We need renationalisation of the railways so investment can be directed for economic growth and social policies and not for short-term profit. I would ask the Council to agree to this motion.
Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. I think most of it's been said by Councillor Pickard, but I just want to pick up on one or two things. When the rail industry was taken into private enterprise and Railtrack came into being, remember Railtrack was brought into public ownership because the terrible incident at Hatfield in that inquiry, and it was determined from that a better way of managing the infrastructure. And when it was privatised, one has to remember the two elements of that privatisation. One was the infrastructure itself, which was managed by Railtrack, and that management of that Railtrack infrastructure also led to, if you want, private businesses carrying out that repair and maintenances, which led to poor maintenance and certainly led to that incident at Hatfield, tragedy as it was. The other element was the train operating company, well known as TOCs, and they were hived off and people made profit out of that and sharing that services. But the reality is this: the poor investment, certainly in that rail infrastructure for the north, and certainly with our rail trains in that for the north, has been poor. And Bruce Pickard has just emphasised the difference in the values that we receive compared to London, 2.6, I think, less than London, or they receive more than we do. We need to actually keep that on the boil. So the importance, I think, of this motion is to keep emphasising the point and the need why we in the north, and certainly in our area, need a good railway infrastructure to help not only our local people move around, but also to help our local economy as we move forward, if we are going to compete not just with the rest of the world, but also with other areas within Europe. So it's important that we keep that momentum up. I fully support this motion, and I do think that we need to make sure that we keep that momentum up. Poor infrastructure in our area means that we will not be able to compete with the rest of the country or the rest of the world, and that can't be good for us.
Is there anyone else wants to speak? Councillor Mason?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to support the motion, but the reasons have already been given, so I'm not going to go over it. But the point which was made by Councillor Pickard, the very good point about the inequality in transport system in this country, I think we should, I would welcome a separate motion on that to be brought to the Council sometime. Thank you.
In that case, can I ask Councillor Newman to exercise his right to reply?
Thank you, Chair. First off, I just want to say thank you to all the people on this side for their contribution. I think they've articulated what we've all been thinking for a long time when it comes to the rail. Just in response to some of the comments that have been made on the other side, first off, we are elected representatives of North Tyneside. I think as elected representatives, when the government is discussing or deciding the future of a vital service such as the East Coast Main Line, it is important they have on paper our views. We are elected representatives. It is our job to express to the government or the people we represent. As for Councillor Wallace, I don't recognise at all the claims of success from the private train operators at all. I don't think there is any evidence to support the statement that private operators have run rail franchises correctly or even efficiently. Just for Virgin East Coast, for example, it was reported that overall customer satisfaction in East Coast was down 4% in the first half of 2017 and down 4% in the second half of 2017. Some of the key KPIs were down 8%, such as punctuality. The stations were down 5%, and overall every category was either no change or had dropped. I think that itself shows that East Coast was being run very badly by Virgin, and this isn't just a one-off. There was a report from Parliament dated January 2017 that said that there has been a slow and steady decline in customer satisfaction across the rail network. And again, I'll give you an example. In 1997, across all operators for the public performance measures, they were scoring 89.9%. In 2015-2016, it was 89.1%, so there has been absolutely no improvement in that time period. And just for information, Virgin East Coast last year got a score of 88%, which is again lower than it was back in 1997. So again, there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that there have been any improvements in performance. Not only that, customer complaints are up. They've been increasing year on year since 2000. So again, there is absolutely no evidence for that. As for financing, the East Coast Main Lines, Virgin said they were going to give £3.3 billion to the government. They haven't delivered on that. They've had to give £200 million in separate, but that's nowhere near the 3.3 billion, which under the contract was supposed to be given in the last couple of years. So the public is down billions because of their mismanagement. I don't think we can seriously consider any evidence which would support the claim that private operators have run it successful, because there is overwhelming evidence that supports the fact that the only time the East Coast Main Line has been run successfully was under directly operated rail, when it had the best customer satisfaction. And just again for information, their customer satisfaction score was 91.9%, the highest in the country. So there is clear evidence that the only people who can actually run a good and efficient East Coast Main Line was the publicly owned company. Now, I'm going to end there, but I'm just going to say that we are going into a very difficult period here with Brexit and devolution, and we need the government to take into account our views that the only way that we can have an efficient and really well-run service is by retaining it in public hands. So I'll ask everybody in the council to support this motion.
Thank you. Now move to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against? Any abstentions? Great. It's 44 for and 4 against. So the motion's passed. That moves us on to the annual financial report. Can I ask Councillor Glindon to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present to the full council the 17-18 statement of accounts for approval tonight. Members are aware that in accordance with accounting regulations, full council are required to sign off the 17-18 audited accounts. The accounts record the authority's financial position as at the 31st of March 2018 by way of a series of formal statements. Changes to the accounts and audit regulations mean that from 17-18 for the first time, the audit accounts must be signed off by the 31st of July. This is 2 months earlier than previous deadline, the 30th of September, with a reduced window of time for the audit. The draft accounts were published in accordance with the required deadline, and members have had the opportunity to attend briefings on the statement of accounts and ask questions. Council may be interested to know that we've had no questions at all on the accounts from members of the public. Whilst we've been preparing for this change for some time, achieving these deadlines has been challenging for both the council and the external auditor. We will continue to learn lessons from this year's audit in preparation for 18-19. As part of this report, the audit completion report is being presented to full council by Diane Harold from External Auditors Mazars. The audit completion report outlines the significant findings of the audit, internal control recommendations, summary of misstatements, and a value for money conclusion. I will now hand you across to Diane Harold from Mazars, who will take you through this report. Diane will present the external audit findings and take appropriate questions. Any technical questions will be answered by the 151 officer, and any political questions will be answered by myself or the Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you very much, Councillor Glindon. Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present the report for the external audit for 17-18, which is an overall positive report. Our work responsibilities are split into 2 areas, the opinion on the accounts and the value for money conclusion. I'm pleased to say that it's an unqualified opinion on the accounts and an unqualified value for money conclusion. We took this report to the Audit Committee last night and went through it in a little bit of detail, more than I proposed doing tonight. And we did apologise to say we know you've only had a few days to look through the report. That's in part, there was an issue in relation to property, plant and equipment, which I'll come to, that took some time to resolve, which I'm happy to say has been resolved now. and also the shorter deadline that Councillor Glindon mentioned. So much tighter deadline this year. So to be in the position where we're at, that we're proposing an unqualified opinion and value for money conclusion, is a really good position to be in, which is probably a good place for me to say our thanks to council officers for the responsiveness and cooperation throughout, and also in particular NG, who work with us to really get to the position we're in. Pleased to be in this position. So if I can take you through the headline from the report. We flagged some outstanding matters in our report, and I'm pleased to say that those have now been resolved, and subject to the very final closing procedures that we carry out, which is normal, we should be signing off by the deadline of the 31st of July. When that's done, we send out an update letter which gets circulated to all members. Moving on to the significant findings of the report. Back when we presented our audit plan to the audit committee, there were a number of risks. We said these are the things that we need to address as part of the audit. And we obtained the assurance we needed for all of those. And I'll touch on two of them, which I think merit mention. The first one is in respect of property, plant and equipment that I mentioned at the start. We highlighted this as a risk, which we do for most of our councils, as the council's assets, its fixed assets, are subject to a degree of estimation in the valuations that are made in order to arrive at the value on the balance sheet. So it's normal for us to have that as a significant risk. This year there arose an issue at this council, and indeed a number of other councils, whereby certain categories of assets are subject to underlying indices which are based on build costs. And the requirements are that where there are such assets that the valuation is looked at the year end to check if it's materially correct. Unfortunately, that control didn't operate as designed, and those assets weren't looked at the year end, and because these indices had shot up, it meant that property, plant and equipment required amendment. So that's the 87 million amendment, which you'll have seen in the accounts, which is a large number. However, it's all been addressed and the audit work's been completed. We have raised a level 1 high priority recommendation in the report, which, as you would expect, the control that didn't operate as designed, that the council should look at what went wrong, how to address it for next year, and that has already started and been looked at, I understand. The other significant finding to mention to you is in respect of the restatement of the income and expenditure account. This was actually the 16-17 accounts and the gross expenditure. There was no actual impact on the total gross expenditure, but there was an issue noted as part of the work in respect of the allocation across the service lines, and in particular the central costs line. We also set out in our report the significant matters that we discussed with management. So there is a bullet point of list of the areas that we looked at, which includes PPE, property, plant and equipment, the financial resilience of the council as that becomes more tight, and also things such as the NNDR appeals provision. We set out in our report, as a result of the work that we've done, internal control recommendations, and there were 8 this year, of which all were reported in our March progress report, bar 2. One was in respect of the valuations issue I've just mentioned, and the second was a housekeeping recommendation, but nonetheless important to raise, in respect of making sure that the property lease database is updated for annual rent reviews. In the report, we also set out what we call a summary of misstatements. And an audit is designed to give assurance that the accounts aren't materially misstated. In the summary of misstatements, we set out what the unadjusted errors are, which are actually below triviality, 139,000. We also set out the adjustments that have been made to the statements, of which I've mentioned 2 already. The property, plant and equipment, £87 million adjustment to assets on the balance sheet, and also the capital charges adjustment to last year's income and expenditure account. There is a third, which I'll mention here if I can, in respect of a pension strain adjustment. This is £1,006,000. This is an issue that arose. This was not any omission of costs by the council. This was the timing of when it's recognised in the income and expenditure account. There is no impact on the general fund balance of this amendment, but as it has been funded from the redundancy reserve. section also sets out a number of amendments to disclosures in the accounts, with only one unadjusted disclosure, which would not impact on our opinion. If I can move into the value for money conclusion section, we set out earlier in the year what our risks were for the value for money conclusion. And the first one was the level of savings required over the period of the Council's medium-term financial strategy. That's the same as last year. We had the same risk, and we generally have the same risk at most of our authorities. Because in order to balance the books these days, current economic environment, most councils are having to make savings and look at how they work. I think that's no surprise to anyone. We also identified a second area where we thought we needed to do some specific work, which was having a look at the Council's arrangements in place for delivering capital projects. Touching on the level of savings risk first, we looked at 3 areas. We actually sample tested the savings plans for 2018-19. We looked at the budget monitoring for the year, and then we looked at the medium-term financial strategy. Level of savings for the year, we noted that this year, similar to last year, that there was a shortfall in savings because things are getting tighter. Having a shortfall isn't necessarily an issue, but it's something we note. In terms of budget monitoring, we noted the overall underspend for the year, which is a positive position to be in, given the savings required and other pressures. In respect of the medium-term financial strategy, we raised a recommendation in respect of the time period covered for the revenue budget. So currently, the medium-term financial strategy covers 2 years, and good practice would suggest it covers at least 3 to 5 years. And we're aware that that has been constrained somewhat by the funding settlement being for a short 2-year period. However, good practice would suggest it covers a longer term period. So taking into account the financial pressures the Council's facing, shortfalls in savings, we raised a recommendation around extending the period of the medium-term financial strategy, which I believe has already been started, and informal discussions have been held with lead members, and also a recommendation around looking at how savings, continuing to look at how savings are reviewed and delivered given the shortfall. Moving on to the second significant risk we raised in respect of capital project arrangements. We were looking at how the overall arrangements were they delivering what the Council intended, because the capital investment programme, of course, is a significant part of our North Tyneside plan. So we looked at the overall monitoring at the investment board level. We looked at the reporting up to Cabinet. We also looked at a sample of projects and the gateway review process. So this is the new process the Council introduced a few years ago, which is being refined as each year goes on. We noticed some good areas of practice. In particular, the Council itself has already started looking at this approach and how it can refine it. We raised a recommendation around the tricky area of when a project finishes, at the completion stage, that really having a look at how the benefits are realised, which can be quite difficult to do, but that's an area where we've raised a recommendation. We also raised a recommendation in respect of longer term projects, which cover a number of years, that there should be periodic evaluation of whether such projects are providing value for money. And I know that there are already specific project boards in place for the big capital projects, but this is just about also doing that backward look to original master plans and checking that such projects are continuing to provide value for money in their arrangements. So for the value for money conclusion, we raised 5 recommendations, one which was priority 1, a high priority in respect of extending the period of the medium-term financial strategy, and several which were medium priority in respect of looking at how continuing to look at how savings are being delivered, given the shortfall. So we're on track to give the opinion by the deadline. It's been an overall positive picture, and there have been some challenges, as we say, obviously the earlier deadline. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
I now ask Councillor Glindon to move the report.
I formally move the report.
And Councillor Pickard, second.
I'll second the report, reserve the right to comment.
Right. In that case, can I invite members to ask questions? Councillor Hodgson.
Chairman, On page 232, headed value...
I'm afraid I don't have page numbers on
Oh,
mine,
yeah.
so if you could...
Well, it's
sorry to interrupt, my apologies.
Section 5, value for money conclusion.
If you can use the ones at the bottom left, which are ours, because I don't...
Oh, I
have
see,
one.
right, 24, right.
Thank you
24.
so much for
Okay. Just a question on the very last paragraph on that page. With reference to the council's trading companies, do we have the necessary strong governance arrangements referred to in the report? Are they required to be set up? And have there been any difficulties experienced so far?
In respect of the trading companies, the recommendation raised there was a housekeeping recommendation about continuing to maintain strong governance arrangements. And when I was presenting the report last night to the Audit Committee, I touched on this. There have been some high-profile issues around local government companies, so it's something that we're always alert to as external auditors, that there needs to be good governance arrangements in place. There has been a public interest report in respect of one council where they do have a local authority subsidiary. There are no such issues that I'm aware of based on our work at this council. Our recommendation here was a housekeeping recommendation derived from our capital testing, whereby we're wanting to make sure that there is complete segregation of duty and the council seem to be independent of its subsidiaries, so that, because you have some council officers and also some council members who are both working for the council and also on the board or officers of the subsidiaries. So my recommendation, the housekeeping one, was just to strengthen those arrangements. And when we were doing some work with the trading companies last year, we also recommended enhancing the arrangements about declaring related party transactions, which is another key area. But I'm not aware of any significant concerns.
Councillor Alice?
Thank you, Chair. I'm referring to page 11 on your papers. It's page 219 on the main papers. There's a list of internal control recommendations, and several of them have medium or high priority. Could you tell me why proper systems weren't in place, and who was responsible for the failure to have effective financial systems that were properly implemented?
I think some of that is actually a question to the council rather than me as external auditor. I can comment on what's in the report, which, as I said in the summary, there is one level 1, which is a high priority risk in respect of property, plant and equipment. And I mentioned the control failed, and there is a management response on the following page setting out how management considers that. I can't comment further on that. That would be a question you would need to raise with officers. The other 3 medium, the level 2 recommendations, these were all ones we raised and reported in our March audit progress report to the Audit Committee. The second one, I can say that we raised that back in March, and that was actually addressed as part of the audit for 17-18. And this was about getting a second person to evidence their review of journals over a certain amount. It wasn't actually that it wasn't happening, it just wasn't being fully evidenced in the way I would have liked, because for us as external auditors, it's a bit dull and boring, but we really like to see evidence for journal controls because that's a key area for us. Similarly, in respect of key monthly reconciliations, I'm aware that's an area where the council and NG are working together to look at making sure there's no inefficiencies, because we like to see things evidenced, we like to see second person reviews, and this is an area where they're also looking at checking what's actually being done and does it need to be done. And the final issue in respect of payroll, this was again raised in March and was looked at about employees having a signed contract of employment in place before they start work. This individual in question didn't actually get paid until the signed contract was in place, and their DBS check, because it was a school employee, was also in place. And this was a recommendation raised for the council to
make sure this doesn't happen ideally, just to remove the issue entirely. So the control didn't actually fail here, the control that we were testing, but we noted something which we thought this needs addressing, so we raised it for the council to look at.
Chair, I wonder if I could ask the question again to Councillor Glindon.
Yes, you can.
I'm just asking to bring it for a bit more. All right. Do you want me to read it again? Regarding the list of recommendations which the auditors has just gone through, could you tell me why proper systems weren't in place and who was responsible for the failure to have effective systems in place?
I think if you read the report, that's already been pointed out why.
I don't think so.
Sorry. If you read the report, that's already been pointed out why. I mean, everything's been answered in the report. I think it's a good report. There has been 1 or 2 recommendations made. Officers have either started now to carry out them recommendations or they've already carried them out.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just follow up on that. Obviously, we haven't had very long at all to read the report, which is a bit of a problem. But the report doesn't actually say who was responsible for the failure.
Well, nobody's responsible for failure. At the end of the day, I mean, when you mention...
I think that's actually an inappropriate question, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, it's an officer's opinion. It's the opinion of the auditors. The question's been answered, and if you want to sort of dig down, then there's other avenues where you should be looking at to dig down. Because you know, the whole purpose of having an audit report is to actually point out the failings and address the failings, and this is what the audit report is all about.
Chair, can I just pick up on that, because you're quite right? I could sit here and blame the government for putting on that pressure. I could blame multiple people. I don't intend to sit here and blame anybody, right? Because we're all learning by this. It's, you know, the report now is, the idea of holding an audit report is so officers, so you know, we don't just put a report forward, it's actually put them as ours at this particular time, put them as ours, and they come forward and say to us, well, you know, you need to look at this, look at that, and look at the other. So basically, I don't intend to stand here and blame any officer. I mean, I'll ask Janice to pick up on it, but you did mention that the timing for the accounts, right? You know, I just happened to look over the last few years, right, under your administration and our administration, some of the stuff has been actually tabled on the day of the council. This, when I came home, and I've been away to London for a few days, and when I came home it was on my door, through my door on Wednesday. So, you know, it's no worse than what it's been under your administration and our administration in the past.
Councillor Wallace.
Chairman, following on the question of the timing, I would like to ask how it can be considered acceptable for us to be expected to give proper consideration to these reports when they arrived on Tuesday evening. The accounts, for example, are 207 pages long. I don't think it's reasonable at all to expect members to have given them proper consideration. And let's remember, we're here on behalf of our residents, are here on behalf of the taxpayers. To get a lengthy document like that, less than 48 hours before a meeting, I think is completely unacceptable. How can that be right as part of the democratic process?
I think Councillor Glindon's already actually answered that question, but I would just like to refer you back to the last council meeting where we were having a discussion about the budget, and our group put forward the idea of an extra day so that officers could look at the proposals. And what you're actually doing now is you're criticising exactly the thing that we were trying to address at that particular time, which you had criticised at that time. So I don't really think your argument stands up based on what's happening in the budget.
Chairman, are you now saying, therefore, that the Mayor's amendments, when it comes to the budget, will not be produced the day before either? She will give us...
No, I'm not
mayor?
saying that at
well,
all.
Well, in that case,
no.
You're accepting my argument that it should all
No, I'm
be
not
presented.
accepting your argument. I'm not even getting into an argument, to be perfectly honest. Can we move on? Anyone else? Again, Councillor Wallace?
Yes. A reference was made to the members' briefings. I attended the members' briefing on this, very much shorter than the information that we've got now, and posed questions. Reference has been made to that as well. Most of the replies came yesterday afternoon at 3:30. Perhaps the Chief Executive could tell me what's happened to the members' protocol in the sense of getting replies within 8 working days, and whether he considers that's an appropriate part of the democratic process.
To be honest, I don't think that should be answered. No.
But I'm sure, thank you very much, that's really revealing. I've got a further question in that case. This one is for the external auditor.
I think one of the things you've got to realise is that everybody gets the same amount of time to read these documents. You know.
Indeed, Chairman, and I'm speaking, I think, for all of us when I think that, say, the 207 pages of a financial report, and they are extensive, the Council has a huge budget. I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect a longer period of time for proper consideration. I don't think that's unreasonable at all.
Well, maybe next year there may be a longer time. You've got to remember this is the first time that we've had to produce them for this date.
It is, Chairman, but the regulations have been in place for several years.
Yes, but we're going back into that argument, so can you move on to your next question?
My question to the external auditor relates to page 231 of our report, 23 of hers, with regard to the unqualified opinion. I'd like to know how an unqualified opinion can be issued when, in view of the key recommendations, that there is no medium-term financial strategy and the identification and delivery of savings is wanting, since many of the savings for the current year and for next year had targets without any identified savings.
So just to sum up, I think the question there is around why is it an unqualified value for money conclusion in respect of the medium-term financial strategy and the savings. I think that's the two key areas of the question. In respect of the savings, that was actually discussed last night. It was a similar question. As I mentioned when I was presenting, not achieving savings doesn't necessarily mean we're going to qualify a value for money conclusion. Obviously, any shortfall, if you look at the council overall, delivered an underspend for the year, which is a really positive position to be in. So it achieved its balanced budget via other mitigating actions and should be commended for that. In respect of the medium-term financial strategy, that is an area I'm aware that is under review, which is why it is a level 1 high priority recommendation. We don't often raise that, and I know that's something that the council is taking seriously and looking at. I also know it's a difficult area, given the funding settlement.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. This question relates to the financial report, and I'm on page 13. In the key facts, this is in the narrative towards the start, under general, in the second paragraph, it says 9 in 10 residents consider their area to be safe during the day. What's the position during the night? How many residents consider themselves to be safe then?
I think that's probably a question that would have to go to officers and get an answer from officers, because it's basically, well, yeah.
I'm surprised it's only one part of the equation that's quoted here. With regard to the following page, management structure, it refers to the head of human resources, the post becoming vacant in October of last year. Since that time, transitional arrangements have been put in place to manage the HR service. Can we be told who is managing that service, who is responsible for it, please?
I beg the question, is that part of internal audit? Yeah. This is, so that's separate entirely. Again, I think that's possibly a question that can be answered by officers at a later date.
It's all part of the report that's been presented.
I know it's part of the report, but we're looking at the audit report in specific, and that's the finance report. So,
Sorry,
in one
Chair,
sense, they're a bit separate.
Item 7 is both of these reports, is it not? According to the papers I had.
Yes,
item
but we're
7
taking
is-
questions to audit at the present moment.
Okay, I'll ask them again later.
Oh, Councillor Mason, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Is it Diane or Diane? I didn't quite get full hearing.
Diane.
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 Diane, okay, Diane. On your report, page 3, on the executive summary, under the point opinion on financial statements, you anticipate issuing an unqualified opinion. Over the page, you've made reference to this being resolved, the £87.7 million difference on the property, plant and equipment. Where does an unqualified opinion become a qualified opinion? Is there some kind of a scale or an amount, some kind of cut-off point?
Oh, crikey, I wish I brought it along. There's a whole auditing standard. It's great nighttime reading, very long documentation. There are, joking aside, it's not something an auditor ever wants to do. However, it's something we would need to do if it was appropriate. It's not something that was considered appropriate here. It's an unqualified opinion. For something to become qualified, there are many different aspects. There's not a set criteria. It is down to the auditor's judgment in terms of materiality. And as I say, there is by an appropriate board, an auditing standard which sets that out. And if something was being considered for qualification, or you can give an adverse opinion depending on the severity of the issue, there is underlying guidance for that.
On the same subject, I know you said that the situation with the PPE has been resolved. Should that resolution actually be brought here tonight for us to look at this, while we're looking at this at the same time, in that case?
Sorry, what do you mean being brought here tonight? It is?
You said that the PPE situation, the 87.7 million, had been resolved.
At the time of me standing here, when this report was issued, we hadn't completed our very final procedures on that. Hence why you didn't actually get the report. So my apologies, as we did say last night, and I've mentioned, I know it was a tight timescale. We actually haven't had much time to do the audit. It's been incredibly tight. So yes, very difficult, however, to still be in this position. The draft accounts haven't substantially changed. There has been a material amendment, but that is excluding that. The draft accounts have been available since the 31st of May for anyone to ask questions about or look at. So quite a few months, the same amount of period we've had to do the audit in.
Councillor Brockback?
Yep. On page 227 of our report, on page 19 of your report, there's a summary of misstatements. Could you tell me, for the first point on that long list of narrative report, how the level of savings needed for 18-19 was more than halved from 21.4 million to 10.1? What was the rationale?
I can see what you mean. It's not intended to be that. This is not that there's been a change of policy, or we don't, there's nothing impacting on the council's budget. This is the narrative report which the council produces. It's like an explanatory foreword, and it included the savings for 1920, I think it was, rather than 18-19. They could have amended it to say these are the savings for 1920. They've chosen to amend it back to say actually the savings for 18-19 are 10.143 million. 21.409 million for the next year on. So nothing's actually changed. It was the narrative needed tweaking. But obviously, when you're looking forward to the year ahead, it was important to make that amendment.
On the same page, on note 5, could you explain, it might just be me, but can you explain, when you talk about grants, that this has been changed to fees and charges? Aren't they totally different things? So why were grants redesignated fees and charges?
All right, I see what you mean. Yes, so there's a table, nature of expenses, which feeds into the income and expenditure account and other areas. And it has two lines on it. One's grants and contributions. It has a number of lines on it, which include grants and contributions and fees and charges. Some in one area were incorrectly classified, therefore the line required amendment in the note. I didn't result in any loss to the council. It was a classification in that note. And there was a similar amendment we made as a result of picking up this error this year to the prior year note. So if you find an error in one year, you need to look at the comparators to check that they might need adjusting too.
Councillor Bell? Gary Bell?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Could the Cabinet Member for Finance just advise me how much money this council's had to find over the last financial year and how much underspend was?
The underspend was, how much? Is it 18 million? How much? No, it was £700,000 underspent, which was a lot of hard work by the officers of the council. And we had to find over £18 million in savings throughout the year. So, I mean, there's been a question asked or a question alluded to about the £700,000. You never know that's there until your final accounts are done. So, you know, for somebody to come and make a statement, I'm not sure whether it's here or was it the audit committee or whatever, but somebody made a statement saying that you know, that £700,000 should have been spent on other things. You don't know nothing's there until the final accounts are done. So, but I mean, I'm very, very pleased with this report. There has been one or two negative things said here tonight, but overall, I'm really, really pleased. This is not my ending speech, by the way. I'm just making a comment as I go.
Can I just ask, has anyone got any more questions for our external auditor? Right? Nobody? Then thank you very much. If people have questions for the finance member, then now's the time to ask. Anyone got any questions for Councillor Glendon? Councillor Blackburn?
Sorry, I'm new, you've had a long day, I'll let off. I appreciate what you're saying about the £700,000, but now you have had the audit, it's been identified. What are you going to spend that money on?
Wherever the government keeps us short this year.
Councillor Gary Bell again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Will the Cabinet Member tell me, for Finance, could the Cabinet Member just ask me, will we asking Northampton County Council, Northampton County Council for any financial advice due to froth passed by the other side?
I don't think so.
Councillor Mark Mullen?
Yeah, would the Cabinet Member for Finance share his concerns, similar concerns to myself regarding Capita's performance and in the way of they're preparing the accounts for PPE?
Yes, that is a concern, but I believe that Mrs Gillespie has been meeting with them and words have been said.
Anyone else got any questions? Right. Councillor Wallace.
Chairman, I have already given two questions about the accounts, which you said couldn't be answered today. It had to come from officers. My third question was going to be with regard to the transition arrangements for HR and the management structure and the transition arrangements in view of the departure of the Chief Executive. My question is, is consideration going to be given to sharing some posts with other authorities in order to operate more efficiently and effectively for taxpayers in both? Thank you.
Can I just chop you off again? This is possibly something that may come further on in the agenda when we talk about changes to posts. But again, it's a question that really isn't for these accounts. You know, this is about these accounts. I mean, it's a valid question, but it's for these accounts. And maybe it's a sort of question that should come in, you know, to the council from a member.
Well, the accounts do refer to events from the 1st of August and from the 1st of September, Chairman, so the narrative is not only looking at 17-18.
Councillor Pickard, I think you might be able to answer.
I'm quite happy to explain it on behalf of it. The HR post he asked before has temporarily been looked after by Janice Gillespie, who's the head of finance, so we'll have a very good hand there. As we said later on, we'll be announcing the obviously Patrick going, and I'll give me congratulations later on that. Not congratulations, but thanks later on. And the head of legal service. Now, all of that allows us to carry on what we said we were going to do, is review the total structure of the council. And whether we go for shared service or not, we haven't ruled out any issues yet, other than what would be in the best interest of the residents of North Tyneside. And we'll certainly be looking at how we provide those services. Looking at, once again, we were radical last time when we took over from you. We had a very top-heavy management structure, paying, I think it was the then chief executive, thousands of pounds per day, and he wasn't even and he was actually only a contractor. We managed to slim that down. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to look at how we provide best service and best value for money.
Anyone got any more questions? Then can I refer to Councillor Glindon for his right to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This to me, well, to say the Chairman is a good report. An unqualified opinion is statement of accounts and value for money conclusion. Confirm the good financial management practices that this authority is in place. Although others may, by the tone of their questions, may think otherwise. We welcome the feedback from the external auditor. We will continue as always to consider areas to recommend improvement. The external auditor has quite rightly pointed out the financial challenges we face, which is through Conservative government. We've been clear during the budget setting process that we understand the financial climate that we are operating in. We certainly don't expect these to go away unless, once she's away on holiday, she calls it another election. I've got to thank all the council officers on our side for the work they've put into this report, because it's not just our partners that do it, there's a substantial amount of council officers from all departments actually carry the work out. We have learned lessons from this. As Diane said, it was a very short time scale but that they had to do it. I appreciate what Councillor Wallace said about, you haven't got much time to read the report, but I think she must have read it well, because from my information she asked a lot of questions at the audit committee last night, some of which is repeated here again tonight. In a different category, different manner. So I would just ask is that I'd like to thank Diane for the work that she's done, and I would just like to ask the full council to approve the recommendations set on the report at paragraph 1.2.
In that case, can we go to the vote? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Those abstaining? 5 abstentions. Must be 44. 44 for and 5 abstentions. So it goes forward. So the report's approved. We now move on to item 8, designation of statutory roles, and I'll now hand over to the elected mayor.
Thank you, Chairman. The authority is required to designate officers of the authority as the head of paid service and monitoring officer pursuant to the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, and to appoint an electoral registration officer, returning officer, and acting returning officer pursuant to the Representation of the People's Act of 1983. As members will be aware, our Chief Executive, Patrick Milieu, who is currently designated as Head of Paid Services, will be leaving the authority on the 31st of July 2018. In addition, our Head of Law and Governance, Viv Geary, who is currently designated as Monitoring Officer, and fulfills the roles of electoral registration officer, returning officer and acting returning officer will be leaving the authority on the 31st of August 2018. The authority is required to reallocate those roles prior to the departure of the officers currently fulfilling the roles in order to comply with legislative requirements. It is therefore proposed that Paul Hanson, the authority's Deputy Chief Executive, who will become Acting Chief Executive following Patrick Millia's departure from the authority, and he be designated as Head of Paid Services from the 1st of August 2018, and that this designation remain in place until the future structure of the Council is known. You will be aware that the Council included proposals in the budget to deliver management efficiencies. As part of this structural review, this will carry out right across the authority. It is proposed that the roles of electoral registration officer, returning officer and acting returning officer are also undertaken by Paul Hanson on the 1st of August 2018. In terms of the monitoring officer role, it is proposed that Louise Watson, who is currently the authority's Deputy Monitoring Officer, should undertake the responsibilities of the monitoring officer from the 1st of September 2018 on an interim basis, pending completion in due course of the review of the structure of the senior leadership team. I therefore would move to recommendation in paragraph 1.2 of the report, which will enable the authority to fulfil its duties in relation to the statutory roles referred to. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pickard, I understand your
Formally second, reserve the right to speak.
Are there any questions? No questions? Then can we just move on to the vote? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Oh, it's unanimous. Oh, a miracle must have happened. Thank you very much, folks. Yes, I think I can. We now move on to item 9, which is the appointment of independent persons, and I understand that Councillor Frank Lott is moving the report.
Thank you, Chair. The Localism Act 2011 places a statutory duty on the authority to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by its elected and co-opted members. The Act requires the authority to have local arrangements to handle any misconduct complaints, and in that context the authority is required to appoint at least one independent person. In the report before Council today, members are requested to renew the appointments of the current holders of these roles and to appoint an additional person from the 1st of August 2018 for a period of 4 years to 2022, bringing the total number of independent persons to 3, and to set a maximum term of office of 10 years. A full recruitment exercise to the roles of independent person was commenced in early May 2018. 11 applications were received. Following a shortlisting process, 4 candidates, including the current holders of the roles of independent person, were interviewed. The interviews were conducted by the elected Mayor, the Chair of the Standards Committee, and Councillor Paul Mason, supported by the Head of Law and Governance. The selection panel identified 3 suitable candidates: the current holders, Mr Clark and Ms Gardner, and a new appointee, Dr Stuart Green. Members will already be aware of Mr Clark and Ms Gardner's experience, and in relation to Dr Green, he has considerable experience of local government standards and is an independent person for 2 other local authorities. In addition to appointing independent persons, Council is also requested to determine that the term of office of an independent person be no more than a maximum of 10 years, and in that regard the appointment of a 3rd independent person will assist in succession planning when the 2 current independent persons reach the 10-year threshold of their appointments in 2022. Now, as a result of the changes proposed in relation to the increase in number of independent persons, Council are requested to agree to the minor consequential amendments to the local arrangements for dealing with Code of Conduct complaints as set out in the appendix to the report. I move the recommendations set out in paragraph 1.2 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have a seconder, please?
I'd formally second, reserve the right to speak.
Are there any questions? Any comments? Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to support this report. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Mr Clark and Ms Gardner for their work in the past.
Anyone else? Then can I invite the mover of the motion to exercise their right to speak?
Little needs to be said. I welcome the ongoing involvement of Mr Clark and Ms Gardner, and I also look forward to working with Dr Green, as I'm sure the entire membership of the Council is. Thank you.
And can we move to the vote? Those in favour, please show. It's unanimous. Right, and that's it. That's approved. Can I move the common seal? Right. And I think it's now, oh yes, it's my job to speak, yes. I just thought I'd like to actually mention something about the role of Chair of the Council. You know, I took the role up on the 17th of May, and since then, between myself and the Deputy, we've actually carried out 71 pieces of work. 90% of those pieces of work have been in the borough. We've done a lot of work with young people, and indeed Councillor Wendy Lott, the Deputy Chair, was very impressed at an event that she went to award certificates to the Coomon students at the Linskill Centre, where you had little 8-year-old children who were getting awards which were equivalent to GCSEs. For myself, I think my sort of highlight of the time up to date was last Saturday when I went to HMS Calliope to be involved in a ceremony for a 95-year-old chap from Whitley Bay, Mr George Crawley, who was receiving the Legion of Honour. And I have, on behalf of the Council, taken the liberty of sending him a letter of congratulations. As far as other things that are going on, I think one of the things that I've got to announce that I'm a bit regretful of is the retirement of one of our drivers, Jim Sadler, who has been with us a long time, and I think we should give him a round of applause and thank him very much for his service to the Council over the years. I think we should also mention the Dome, which some of us were at on Saturday, which is finally open, and I think virtually everyone in this council at some time or another has prayed that we'd get to this point. So, you know, again, it's absolutely great to see it. I hope a lot of people use it because it is iconic, to put it mildly, and I think the people who've actually been around it have really enjoyed it. I went to an event today, and to be perfectly honest, it was in South Tyneside, and I don't know why I was actually there, because all the people were talking about was the Dome. And it was great to actually hear this, you know, that people were talking about North Tyneside at an event which was for Northumberland, ourselves, and South Tyneside. So at that point I will shut up because I'm inclined to go on too long and hand over to the elected Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as you can imagine, I want to take this opportunity to thank Patrick Amelia, who tonight is attending his very last council meeting with us here in North Tyneside. As you know, Patrick is leaving authority to take up the post of Chief Executive at Sunderland City Council. During Patrick's time at North Tyneside Council, he's done a tremendous job in leading significant projects across the borough, as well as working on the North of Tyne Devolution project. And I'd just like to, before I go on about that, I just want to talk about people and people who are voted by the people to do things can sometimes put their values aside and think about the people who we serve. Because I had the pleasure this year of meeting a number of ministers on the opposition side, as you know, Patrick. And I have to tell you, they were prepared and they said to me, this is not about politics, this is about people and place. And I remember asking our MP, Mary Glindon, to go down to London on a number of occasions to knock on a minister's door to help us to move things forward. And Mary got that agreement from the ministers. So in opposition, I know they have to hold us to account, but there are some actually opposition people who are prepared to put the people first. And I think that was really I was really grateful at that time. So when you said, Councillor Hodgson, it would be better for their necker to do it, I think we have been quite successful on knocking on ministers' doors and having some success, to be quite honest. And I just want to say that the devolution project was laid in Parliament on the 24th of July 2018. And I think when you heard those reports today about the education service, our adult education, and our young people, I think we have, and he helped us to lead a program, a change program that has helped the organisation become more efficient and work better for our residents. And I think Patrick would tell you that when we first met, that our mantra was, residents come first. And I think we actually have carried out a great deal of work, to be quite honest, improving things for our residents. And I know by the kind of remarks I get back, by the emails I get back, by the letters and calls I get back. And that's perhaps why we've got 53 seats now, would you not think? Anyway, this is about you, Patrick. I know I deviated, but I think I have to make the point that sometimes people put a vote across in the box for your confidence, and that's what we're there for, to help them. Regardless, we sometimes have to step aside. We know what our values are, but sometimes we can work together for the people. Now, Patrick, I just want to say to you, I'm sure you'll join me in wishing all of you here, that everybody here will wish you success in your new role in Sunderland. And I know you've got a few challenges, don't worry, we're quite aware of those, Patrick, we're quite aware of those. But I also like to take this opportunity to wish Paul Hanson, who was agreed to act as Chief Executive and the Head of Pay Services, every success in his new role when he takes it up in August. And at least Paul knows actually where we're coming from. He knows that residents come first because he keeps saying it every time. And finally, I would like to thank Viv Geary, Head of Law and Governance and the Council's Monitoring Officer, who has decided after 30 years of dedicated service to North Tyneside Council, she's going to leave the authority. She said to me something about, I think I've had my shelf life. I wouldn't say that, Viv, you did us proud. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Viv for her service to the borough and wish her well too in every success in the future. And to you all in council today, I wish you all, and our staff, I wish you all an enjoyable summer break. Thank you very much.
I don't think the chair gets a break, to be honest, Mayor.
We'll make sure you don't, Tommy.
Can I move on to questions from members? And we have one question from Councillor Hutchcroft. Do you want it taken as read, or do you want to read it out?
Take it as read, please, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pickle.
Thank you, Chair. Planning condition number 30 of the Planning Commission for the Benton Rise development requires the developer Persimmons to provide highway improvements to mitigate the traffic flows generated by the development. The highways elements of the work will be carried out in phases and are programmed to commence in September 2018.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Only that I was under the impression that there was certain trigger points, and that's the reason for the question, because obviously the residents are aware of when the Planning Commission went forward that there was actual trigger points which the work would be done as those trigger points were reached, and that's why the question's there, because that's what the residents were asking the question.
Yeah, there are, but the roadworks have to be planned in conjunction with Highways England, and because of the number of traffic flows taking place, we've had to plan the work through. Obviously, Norham Road will be finished by then, the A19 will be substantially finished close by then, so although it starts in September, it's a programme that goes on for about 18 months to deliver it, so that by the time Station Road has to be closed off, at some stage for major works, we'll have the other two roads will be open at that particular time. So it's for that reason. It's nothing to do with the trigger points or any issue with the trigger points. It's to do purely with highway convenience of still being allowing the flow of traffic. Because if we close that road when the other two are closed, it will be a major problem. But I can get the officers to give you the full programme if you want. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pickle. Can I now close the meeting and wish everybody a safe and speedy journey home? Thank you very much.
Last one,